Hi, I'm Ashley DeLatour, staff member at Futures Northwest. Today in our Caregiver series, we're going to be talking about how to apply for financial aid. I have an amazing financial aid expert with me. Her name is Christina Winstead from the Washington Student Achievement Council, and I'm going to have her introduce herself briefly before we dig into all of this amazing information.
Hi, I'm Christina Winstead. I work with the Washington Student Achievement Council with the 12th Year Campaign. And so our campaign works to make sure that all students have access to apply to financial aid in college admissions. And I'm really excited to talk about one of my favorite topics in the whole wide world, which is how to pay for college. How do you apply for financial aid?
Yay! And just so y'all know, like if I ever get stuck at a financial aid event, I call Christina. So just know that she's legendary. Yes.
Aww. Well, I'm very excited to help you guys navigate this, especially as caregivers. There's so many misconceptions. So today we're going to talk about what financial aid is. What is financial aid? When should students apply for financial aid? What information you're going to need as a caregiver. Not every caregiver is going to have to provide financial aid information for their student, but we will talk about who will have to provide information and what information they need to provide, and then how to apply and some help and resources. So financial aid is my favorite thing in the world, and this is why. It helps students pay for their post-secondary pathway so they can do something they love every single day and get paid for it. So my whole goal for your students is they find something they love to do that, of course, earns a livable wage. I want them to be able to put a roof over their head and food on the table, and I want them to be able to map out where they are now and how to get to that career. Because in a very short period of time, these students will be taking over the world. They'll be running this world. And I want them to be in the positions that they want to be in, the careers that they love, so that they can enjoy what they love to do every single day and get paid for it. Not everything they love to do is going to earn that livable wage. You know, I like watching scary movies and crafting. Am I going to earn money doing that? No. For the parents that maybe have just said, yes, thank you, caregivers, for your belief in my ability to craft. I craft like a 2-year-old. It's real embarrassing. Like literally, I made my dad something for Christmas a couple years ago, and they're like, "That's so sweet. What grade is she in?" And my dad was like, So not going to earn a livable wage making crafty stuff, but I also love financial aid. I don't know why. This is really fun for me to navigate families and their students through this process so that everyone has access to the funds that are available to them. So financial aid, it's really simply put, it's just money to help pay for college. There are 4 different types of financial aid. There's grants, that's money students typically don't have to pay back. Work study, where students work while going to school, loans, and scholarships. And all these different pieces to this puzzle that is financial aid, they are going to be what helps your student pay for their education.
Yep.
So no matter how you apply for financial aid, the first day that it's open is October 1st. So I always tell families, pumpkin spice and everything nice, as soon as those pumpkin spice lattes come out, or if you want to try something different, an apple spice latte, just saying. Once you see those things start happening, it's time to start applying for financial aid. So it's time to start gathering your information together and knowing that you're going to apply typically in the month of October. Now, if you are watching this video and it is after October, it's okay. There are deadlines to apply for financial aid, but a lot of them are more to make sure that they can process the applications in time. So I encourage you, before you give up thinking, oh, we missed October, don't worry. It opens in October, and there's financial aid that you can apply for. I'm even having students that will apply in the summertime if they've just made the decision last minute to go to college. So it starts in October. I encourage you to get it done as soon as possible. But if it is after October and you're listening to this, don't worry. Still apply for financial aid. You're going to follow the steps that are listed here today.
Also, just a side note, you will need to do this every year. This is every fall.
Yeah.
Yep.
Every year that you're a student going to college, and caregivers, if you're thinking of going back to college, that's okay. It's also time for you to do your financial aid application. So you guys can do this together. You and your student can apply for financial aid at the same time. There's no limit to the number of family members that can apply for aid.
And I have to say, as a non-traditional student, that's what us older folks are called in the system. I was one of them. When I came back, I only found out that I had to apply for financial aid every year because I was in the library listening to some young people talk about how they needed to reapply. And I was like, reapply? What? Oh, okay, I'll do that. So here, now you can know that. You don't have to be embarrassed in the library. And if you have multiple people going to college at the same time, it actually really benefits you. So if you even are maybe wanting to scratch that itch, do it. Just do it.
Yep. See The first step is to apply and see what funding they're willing to provide you. But if you don't apply, they will not offer you anything. Financial aid officers, unfortunately, are not psychic. If they were, they'd have different jobs. So they don't know you need the money until you fill out an application. So it's really your first step.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some information that parents will need. Now, this is where we're going to use the term specifically parent, because in the financial aid process, they are looking at parent information, and other types of caregivers may not have to provide any information. So we will talk about very shortly here who are the parents for financial aid and determining if your student is going to require parent information in their application. So the student's going to need their driver's license or state ID if they have one. If they don't, no problem. But it's probably time for them to start thinking about either getting a driver's license or an ID card for Washington State, especially if this is where they're planning on residing. If they have a social security number, then, and as well as parents, if you have a social security number, I encourage you to have your card available to you when you fill out the information, because they are matching the information from the social security database to your application for financial aid. The application for financial aid is not based upon the parent's status. It is based upon the student who's applying status. So if you're worried about if you're undocumented specifically, or you have a mixed status family, it is okay. There are two different applications in Washington State. We'll talk about those more in a minute, but your student's still going to be applying for aid. It's just applying for the right application. You're going to need some income information, and this is going to be for your student who is a senior right now. So if they are starting their senior year, this is going to be 2019 tax information that we'll be using next year, and they will be applying for the 2021-2022 financial aid application. So is because that's when they're going to go to college. It sounds super futuristic, especially the way things have been going. Time seems a little different, but that is actually when they'll go to college, and they'll apply for financial aid every year that they plan on going to college. The first application they do, they will be loading in all of their information, general information, their name, their address, things like that. When they renew their application, their second year of applying for aid, it's going to import a lot of that information. So it's a little bit easier to do the application year after year, because they're retaining some of the information. You just have to verify. So you want to make sure that you have your W-2, and if you've done a 2019 tax form, then a copy of your taxes. Additional information is going to be child support statements if you have been receiving TANF, or if you were receiving unemployment, that's typically going to be taxable funds. And then it's going to look at any investments you have. When they say real estate investments, that means beyond the house that you live in. So if you're renting a property because you have multiple properties, then they're going to want to know more about that real estate investment. If you are living in a home that you own or working on paying off and you reside in that house, they are not considering that a real estate investment. That is the home that you live in. They're also going to look at family businesses and farms if you have more than 100 employees. So that's some of the basic information that you want to have with you when you're getting ready to apply for financial aid. So who's going to need parent information? It really depends on if your student's considered dependent or independent. Now, this is for financial aid purposes. We know you may have a very dependent or independent student in your home, and the definition that you have for it may not match what the financial aid application is asking for a dependent student. So independent, it's easier to talk about what is considered independent versus dependent. Most of our students will be considered dependent, which means that until they're 24, they're going to need their parents' information for the financial aid application. But some students will be considered independent. And if they are, they're either at least 24 years old, or they are married. Maybe you have a student who is getting a graduate or professional degree, and that means that they've completed their bachelor's and they're moving on to a master's or a postmaster's degree. Students who are veterans or members of the armed forces are considered independent. Students who are an orphan or a ward of the court, so anyone who's been in foster care, they're a youth in care after the age of 13. If they're emancipated, or a youth who's at risk of becoming homeless, who is self-supporting, or someone who is struggling with homelessness with their family. These are going to trigger typically an independent status. And what that means is they're only going to ask for the information for the student versus the student and the parents. If you don't meet those criteria, then students are typically going to be considered a dependent student. Now, the independent student status criteria, there might be a situation that your family is in that it's not listed there directly, but that may allow the student to be independent. If that's the case, they're going to ask you in the financial application, they're going to ask the student if they can provide parent information. And if they can't, let's say their parent's incarcerated, they have no relationship with their parent, or for some students, they have no contact with their parent for legal reasons, then they can petition to the college they're applying to for a dependency override so they can become dependent, or independent, I mean. So that way they can determine if they're not listed specifically, their situation in here, they're also looking at other situations too. So once you determine if your student's independent or dependent, the next is determine who the parent's going to be for financial aid application. Again, we're going to use terms here like parent when really we know that caregivers is more appropriate term. But for financial aid purposes, they are going to have the student designate who their parent is if they're considered dependent. So this process is just for dependent students. If your student is considered dependent, and let's say you're a grandparent the student lives with, or you're a legal guardian, so you've gone through the legal guardianship process. If that's the case, they're not going to use your information. So they are looking at who the biological parent is and the situation the student is in. If the parents are married, then it's going to be both parents' information. If the parents are remarried, it's the parent that the student lives with the most and the step-parent. So it's going to be where the student lives. It's not about where they're claimed on taxes. It's about where they sleep at night. So it's 51% or more of the time that they are sleeping somewhere else. If the parent is single or widowed, it's going to be the surviving or single parent. Unmarried, separated, or divorced, but living together. Awesome. Congratulations. But unfortunately, it's going to require both parents' information. And then if your parents are divorced, if the student's parents are separated and not living together, it's the parent that they live with most. So again, it does not have anything to do with taxes. This is all about where the student lives and who's providing the support. Now, if you're in a family that's a 50-50 split, you're like, we are 50-50. There's 365 days in a year. So I know that child is sleeping somewhere else one night more. If there's a 50-50 split, the next determination of who's going to be the parent for financial aid purposes and providing financial information for their student's aid, it's going to be on who's providing the most financial support. So it starts with where is the student living? If it's 50-50 split, then the next is who's providing the most financial support. So this is a spreadsheet. I love that it is so challenging that there has to be an infographic for families. So if you are confused, totally fine, perfectly normal. You're just going to follow through this infographic and follow along with whatever situation is your situation, and then provide that parent information. So now, which application to do? So there's 2 different applications in Washington State, which can be confusing, but it's just that you're wanting to select the application that is correct for your student. So it depends on the student's situation. If your student, if they have citizenship status or they're from a freely associated state like Marshall Islands, typically they're going to do the FAFSA. So again, this is about the student's citizenship status versus the parents. This is all about the student when you're picking out the application. The WASFA is our state application for financial aid, and that application is for undocumented students or students with expired or unexpired DACA status. So in Washington State, we have a law where you can apply for financial aid. It doesn't matter what your status is. It matters on how long you've been going to a high school in Washington State and if you complete your degree in Washington State. We want all students to have access to financial aid funding to help to pay for their post-secondary goals. So when you apply for the FAFSA, that application there, I encourage you, you'll want to start some processes, including creating your FSA ID, and there's a video on that where you can watch and learn how to create an FSA ID and then create one. The other piece with the FAFSA application that I encourage you is if you're doing this application and your parents are undocumented, again, it doesn't matter your parent's status. If you are able to do the FAFSA, you're applying for federal and state funds, and you'll be listing your parents' social security numbers as zeros, and we'll talk more about that. Mm-hmm. So caregivers, that's going to be the biggest challenge, is if you don't have a social security number and you're required to provide parent information for the FAFSA or the WAFSA, totally can provide that information. You're just going to want to follow the steps that they list and make sure you use zeros as social security number, and don't use your tax identification number. If you do your tax identification number, it's going to create an error. The WASFA application is for Washington State aid. So that application is for students who are staying in Washington, who are typically undocumented, and want access to funds to pay for post-secondary education. Mm-hmm. So it's not about doing as many applications as possible. You pick the one application that is the one that you can apply for. So you're going to help your student pick out the correct application. Now, if you're looking at this going, I don't know which one to do, no problem. You're going to go to readysetgrad.org/WAFSA. There's 5 questions that they're going to ask you, and it's going to determine which application you should be completing as a student.
Now, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a student in a mixed status family and you don't feel comfortable filling out the FAFSA, can you complete the WASFA instead, even if you
Yeah.
have a social security number?
Yeah, so if you have a social security number and you qualify for the FAFSA but do not want to fill out the FAFSA for your own reasons,
Yep.
that is okay. You're going to complete the WAFSA application, and it's going to ask if you can qualify for FAFSA, and you're going to say no on there, and it's going to let you complete the WAFSA application. You will only be applying for state funds, so you're going to be wanting to attend a school that's in state to access those funds, but you can definitely just apply for WAFSA funding versus the FAFSA funding. It is each family's decision whether they want to apply for financial aid, and we're here to support you with that process. It doesn't matter what your decision is. If you have a student that doesn't qualify for either, there'll be a very small number of students that don't qualify for the FAFSA or the WAFSA based upon when they move to Washington State. If that's the case, there's like 45 pages of scholarships for students that are undocumented. It is literally all scholarships that have no requirement for citizenship status. So then what we're going to do with you is we're going to work with you on applying for scholarships. We just want to make sure that students have access, whatever their pathway is, whatever the decisions are, to be able to pay for their education. Okay, so the WAFSA, this is what the application looks like. The WAFSA itself is going to have a 5-question questionnaire. It's going to walk you through whether you qualify for the FAFSA or the WAFSA. And then there's also a privacy statement so you can see how your data is being used. I always encourage you, you are going to have your data used in certain ways. You want to know how it's being used in any application. I'm not just talking about financial aid. Like, even read your Apple phone, your iPhone updates, things like that, just to see what data is being utilized. The application itself, so this is for the WAFSA. For next year, it'll say that 2 application years are going to be the 2021 and the 21-22 application. So a lot of students will pick the wrong financial aid year because they're looking at the year they're going to graduate from high school. But if you apply for the 2021 financial aid, you're applying for financial aid for this current school year when the student's not in college. If you accidentally fill out the wrong financial aid year, it's okay. Don't worry. You're going to do what we call the practice financial aid application. You're going to go ahead and renew that application as a returning user, and you're just going to go ahead and start the application for the 2021-2022 year. So that's the 2021-2022 year for your seniors this upcoming year, and you're going to use 2019 tax information. So for caregivers, for the parents specifically in this section, this is when you're going to have to provide some basic information about yourself, as well as some financial information. So if you're selected as the parent, it's going to ask for a social security number. Again, you're going to use zeros. If you don't have a social security number, that's no problem. It's going to ask for basic information. And at the top, you see it says parent information. So that's going to be about the parent themselves. It's also going to ask about marital status and the number of people going to college from your household. After that, there's going to be, when the student's done with their application, there's going to be an electronic signature process that the student can complete to identify you as the parent that needs to sign this application. So they're going to put in some general information, they're going to sign the application, and then they're going to request that you sign the application as well by selecting you as the parent to provide a signature. So in the application, they're going to use your email address. You're going to get an email. This is for the WAFSA specifically. You'll get an email, and then you're going to agree to the terms on that email and sign the application digitally. So that's for the WAFSA. For the FAFSA, you have 3 different ways you can apply. There's paper, there's the website, and then there's the app. The app is on phones. And the website, the app and the website are the 2 easiest ways to apply that we are finding, the quickest ways to apply. The paper application takes a little bit of time, but is a great tool for those who do not have access to the internet and do not have the access to using the FAFSA app on their phone. Yeah. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal financial aid. In this process, when you apply, you can apply for the application in English or Spanish, and you can log out and log back in. So if your student is working on the application and you speak Spanish, you can have the student log out and you can log back into the Spanish language application and utilize it to enter your parent information. This is what the website looks like. It's just FAFSA.gov. In the parent information section, it's going to be the same just like in the WASFA. They're going to ask for your social security number. So in this application, here's my tip. It's going to ask for your social security number and you're going to put zeros in if you don't have one. What's going to end up happening is when you click the next button, it's going to say that there's an error and that the error is the zeros, but that is not the error. So what you have to do is re-enter the zeros in and click next again. And again, it's going to tell you that you have an error, but it's not an error. Don't worry. All you're going to do is enter the zeros in one more time. 3 is the magic number here. And then you're going to click next and it will resolve the error and move you on to your parent financial information versus demographics. So the trick is, again, if you are not using a social security number and you're using zeros, first double check and make sure you put zeros in instead of your ITIN number. Don't use your ITIN number, just zeros. You're going to double check that their zeros are there. Make sure everything looks correct, and you're going to click next. Again, you'll enter zeros in again, click next, and the third time you do it, it will process along and it will remove the error. If you get stuck at all, you can always reach out to us. But this is one of the pieces that kind of catches our families, is that it throws an error code when there really isn't an error. Another option you might have access to, depending on your status, as well as if you filed taxes and the taxes that you filed, is you might be able to use the data retrieval tool. This imports information directly from the IRS into the student's application for financial aid. It can be used for both the parent and for the student. In order to do this, for the data retrieval tool, you'll need to create an FSA ID and you'll have to have a social security number. There are certain types of taxes that you file that don't make you eligible for the data retrieval tool. If you file an international tax form, unfortunately, it will not allow you to import it from the site. If you're a student doing this, or if you're a caregiver who doesn't have a social security number, you're going to have to manually enter this information. Totally fine. It's easy to do. You just won't be able to import it. If you are able to import your taxes, it's pretty simple. It'll be from your 2019 taxes, and you're going to want to enter in the information into the boxes here as exactly listed on your taxes. So if you lived at 181st Southwest and you spelled out Southwest on your tax form, you're going to spell out Southwest on this here, because it is matching exactly as listed what they have on file for you and what you're putting in here. And if it doesn't match, you won't be able to import it. So if there was a mistake on your application for taxes, and let's say there's a space before your address starts, you have to enter that in too. So anything, it's exactly as listed, character for this to work.
Now, you were talking to me earlier about an interesting thing about autofilling. Can you talk about autofilling?
Oh yeah, autofill is like amazing and wonderful, but there's a catch. Just like any other tool, there can be some challenges. When you're using your phone to do this process, or even your computer and you use autofill, it typically will put a space after your name. So it's not going to catch that as, it's going to say it's another character and it's not going to match up in the system. So you want to make sure if you're using autofill and it's set to create a space after the word that you've selected, that you remove that space so that it matches up to the Social Security. It's definitely a challenge that I find. It's great for being able to enter your information very quickly in this process, but in this process, it is not a race. This is getting it done accurately, because if there's errors, you have to go back in and fix those, and it can take more time. So doing it once, doing it right is the best way to get this application done. If you're doing financial aid with other families and you see people getting done first, don't worry. It's not about who finished it first. It's about who finished it accurately.
Yes.
So the last thing they're going to ask you about as a parent is going to be parent assets. These are the same questions for financials and assets that they're going to be asking the student as well. So you might have to help your student navigate this, because these are terms that most students are not familiar with when it comes to assets and to investments. For you as a parent, if you are doing this application, your assets are going to be cash savings and checkings, and that's the first thing that they're going to ask you in this section. This is the last section of parent financials. For investments, they are looking at if you have an additional home, like not the place that you're living, but additional real estate. Maybe you're renting, but if you have additional real estate beyond your own home, College saving plans. That is another piece that will be included in investments. Bonds, not your retirement. Your retirement does not count in there. If you've drawn your retirement, then it's going to show up as income. And then it's going to ask what your net worth of a business that you have. So if you have a business or a farm that has 100 or more employees, so 101 or more employees, then they're going to ask you some financials about that business. But if it's a small business, then you won't have to provide that information. So here's some important tips. You want to make sure when you're doing this process as a caregiver that you know that that student's application is their own, because the wording in the application, it'll be much easier when you look at it as that application for the student versus your own application for yourself. If you're doing your own application, you can do them at the same time. Just remember that the student is whoever's applying for aid. So whoever's going to college, they need to be the person filling out the application and putting their information in. Because I've had plenty of parents accidentally apply for financial aid for themselves when they really want their student to go to college. So it will say you and yours, and that means the student in that process. When you are working on this application, if your student is already working on the application on one device, you do not want to log in at the same time. It tricks the system. So you only want to have one person working on the application at a time. There will be little blue question marks that you can click on throughout the process for either application, and that's just to clarify the questions they're asking you. So if you're not sure where to put, your adjusted gross income from your taxes on this, if you click on that, when you put your tax form in, it tells you, oh, it's line 47. Take line 47 and put it here. So it helps you understand the questions more. And again, if you don't have a social security number, please use zeros. If you get stuck and it says it's an error, you're going to click next 3 times after entering those zeros and it should resolve itself. And then finally, we have our resources. Do you want to talk about your amazing resources, Ashley?
Sure. We have lots of videos. We have infographics shared here. So you'll want to scroll by the scholarship section, which comes first on the website, and then go down into the FAFSA WASFA section. And you'll just see a bunch of videos, tips, forms where you can keep track of things. Like if you want to write down the answers to your security questions, highly recommend doing that. We've got like pages that you can download and then write down that information. We've got how to read your financial aid award letter. We have just a bunch of great resources on there. So I encourage you to check that out. And if you have questions that are not answered there, please email me or Christina. Like, we definitely want to help you. So if you can't find what you need and you need to talk to a person, we're here.
And then the 12th Year Campaign, we have resources including toolkits, workbooks, things to help you as a caregiver, as well as things for students specifically to help you with this process. And then we also, if you're working with youth in care, anyone who's been in foster care, there are resources available specifically to these youth. And so I encourage you, if you're supporting students in these categories, we have additional resources we're happy to send you that'll help you prepare for your student as they get ready to go to college, and all the resources that can help them prepare for college and grow that own college-going culture within themselves by completing some of these activities and looking at some of the supports that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So that is financial aid. I know that it can be very scary. I'm so excited to help you as you help your student navigate this next chapter of their life. We are here to support you in this process. There will be events this fall that will help you with financial aid completion. And if you are listening to this and it is winter or spring, there'll be other times that we will have supports, including one-on-one appointments, as well as events to help you and your student complete their application for financial aid.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sticking with us all the way to the end. And if you have more questions, again, please email us. If you need links to the sites that we referenced here, they'll be in the show notes. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.